Welcome to the next 24 hours, the podcast that truly changes people's behavior and their lives. And I have a guest in the studio today. His name is Chris Milligan, and he's been doing that for years. He's been an amazing marketer for years, and now he is the CEO at the Cincinnati Opera. Today, we're going to be covering things like failing successfully, habits to make you successful. The last thing is, how do you take a blunder and turn it into a bullseye? Chris is going to show us all of those and tell us amazing stories. And get ready, we've known each other for years. He's also going to share some things about me you've never heard before. Welcome to the next 24 hours, where I'm going to give you real information you can really use to transform your life and work one day at a time. I'll be your host, Curtis Zimmerman. Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited that you're here to join us today because in studio we have a special guest. He is the CEO, Mr. Chris Milligan of the Cincinnati Opera. Now, what's amazing about Mr. Milligan is I've known him for years, but he's all things advertising. He's all things marketing. He's kind of a guru, crazy guy that goes and really expands people's understanding of an amazing art form. He's going to be joining us today. We're going to do some deep dives in what he does every day. Please welcome Chris Milligan. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Curtis.
How are you today?
I'm glad to be here.
Excited that you're here, and I can't even begin to tell you. I'm going to interview a lot of different people. I've interviewed a lot of different people, but I don't think I've ever interviewed somebody that knows me better than you do. And our story goes back many years, and I was hoping maybe you could tell a little bit about how we became acquainted and kind of our backstory. That would be huge.
Sure. Well, let me just say first, I'm glad to be here, and also I don't think anyone has ever interviewed me that knows me as well as you do. So we met. I was trying to remember. It was probably in the early 90s, something like that. And at the time, I had graduated from Miami University from a degree that focused on music and business. And I found myself at the Muse Machine. The Muse Machine is an arts education organization that's in Dayton, Ohio, as you know. And I think at the time, you were one of the artists that we worked with. So you were a mime, and I knew that you had an amazing reputation, although I don't know that I had seen you perform at that point. Well, it happened one day that I arrived at work, and this was in I think it's the Metropolitan Arts Center in downtown Dayton. And as I arrived, one of my colleagues approached me just as I was entering the offices and said, Chris, I'm so glad you're here. Can you please confirm that the dance troupe that is expected in Mercer County will soon be there? And it struck me immediately that I had neglected to call the school and let them know that, in fact, the dance troupe had an injury or an illness among their troupe and could not be at the school. And they told me that the prior day, in the busyness of the day, I neglected to call the school.
And just to paint the picture so people know, how many people would have been in that arena? Was it just like a little high school with 7 people, like 20 people or 50 people? What did that look like?
It was the worst, right? So this was up in Mercer County, and in those more rural districts, the tradition was that schools from throughout the district would be bussed into a central location. So there was a lot of logistics, a lot of coordination that happened between the club advisor and all of the bus drivers and the teachers and the students and permission slips and whatever you could imagine. And they're all gathered. And I learned that very precisely when I call the school and I speak to the teacher advisor, and he says, Chris, please tell me they're on their way. I've got a whole gymnasium full of about 700 kids, which in a suburban district like Mason or Centerville would not be such a significant thing because they would all be at that building anyway. But these were students who had been bussed in to a central location. So I'm imagining in my mind, gymnasium with all the those like pull-out riser kind of seats, and all the kids eager to see an amazing troupe of dancers walk in and offer a performance. And I said, oh my gosh, I am so sorry. It is completely my fault. The dance troupe called me yesterday, and they are not able to be there this morning.
You were living the dream that morning, weren't you?
I was living the dream. And I said, let's talk later today. I'm sorry that you have to deal with this. I promise you that if your school was any closer, and I was ready to do this, that if the school was within 30 minutes, I would go get in my car, drive to that school, and give an impromptu, spontaneous, worst performance you have ever seen of a mix of I don't know what I would have danced, and I'm not a dancer. I would have sung, and I could have come up with something. I would have done spontaneous poetry or rhyme or whatever, just to save the day. And even though it would be a really, really bad performance, it was a performance. So yes. There was a performance.
But in actuality, it was how far away?
It was 2 hours away.
2 hours.
It was 2 hours away. There's no way that I could, and it was remote enough that it's not like I could have called an artist who lives in the area. Anyway, so we talked later that day or the next day, and the school was ready to end its relationship with the organization that I was working for and represented, the Muse Machine. And I pleaded with him to say, for the sake of the students, really, to say, give us one more chance. Give us one more chance. We will take care of your entire membership fee for the year. You don't need to worry about that. And we will bring a performance I know that you're going to like. And I'll come up personally and offer whatever apologies that need to be made. And we will make this right. And so he took a day or two to reflect on that and called back. And we decided to give it a go one more time, which meant the whole permission slips and getting the teachers on board again to one more time and go over to the Muse Machine performance at the central location. And so then my challenge was to find, well, what do I know for sure is actually going to deliver an amazing performance? And I had heard about this guy named Curtis Zimmerman, who was a mime, who could be in front of any audience and who would just leave them totally entranced. And in my mind, I was thinking about, okay, this needs to appeal to administrators and teachers and the football team and the band members and the computer club, just the whole, every demographic within the school needed to engage with this as much as we could make that happen was what I was looking for. So I reached out to you. And this was maybe the first time we had spoken. We'd probably met each other, I presume, but we found a date. I rented a car. I came over to your house and picked you up. And so we spent 2 hours there, the performance, and then 2 hours on the way back, getting to know each other. And both, I gave you the whole backstory. I may or may not have characterized you as our secret weapon with regard to performers that we knew would really deliver every time. And here's what happened. So we got to the school, and it was, as I think we'd imagined, a gymnasium. Lots of students had gathered, and you came and did the performance. Of course, it's mime, so it is mostly silent. And there's a great irony here in that you would think you don't need to be quiet when you're listening to mime because there's no sound that you're missing. But it does, because there's no sound, require your very focused visual attention, which, for whatever reason, audiences tend to be silent for. I see the most silent audiences. I'm remembering seeing the most silent audiences in watching mime performances. Right? The other would be those very intimate moments in opera when a soprano is singing unaccompanied, a small moment, and the audience is wrapped in attention and completely silent. And this is what happened. The audience was silent and watched the entire time. I remember that I was what we would think of as house right, and I could see you performing. I could see most of the student audience, and across the way, then across the gym, I could see out into the hallway, because the two, those big doors into a gymnasium, those were propped open. And I heard kind of like coming down the hall. I was like, oh, unbelievable. Like, what is this noise? And it's a custodian pushing a mop that is in a pail and making his way down the hall. And he passes. And then I hear the sound again coming the other way. And he's back in the frame of the doors again. And now he's watching. And then he props his mop up against the wall, no longer holding it. Then he moves to a seat.
Wow.
In the front row and watches, and then he just stays for the rest of the performance. And so I thought, if this, something magical is happening here with these students, with their teachers, with the faculty, with the administration that was there, with even some of the custodial staff coming in. And it was young people, it was adults, it was an extraordinary experience. And afterwards, every one of them was on their feet applauding your performance. So we, mainly you, saved the day, and the school returned happily to the program and has remained ever since, so long as there haven't been any more cancellations that weren't communicated. But this is how you and I met. And so I was grateful for the time that we spent in preparation for the performance. I was awestruck by the performance itself. And then following that, we could kind of breathe a little bit after the performance and feeling like, okay, we did them right. And, they're back on track. And most importantly, the students got to experience something really remarkable, something I think that they probably still remember today. And so here we are, some 25, 26 years later, whatever it is, and you're no longer miming.
Right. I know. Right. I was just going to paint that picture that when you picked me up that morning, literally, I was in full white face.
Yes.
Mime white face, mime outfit, striped shirt, suspenders. I mean, just what you would think a mime would look like. Getting into your car, driving in Ohio, cows, and so even it was sticking out in that way. It was a great day and a great friendship, obviously started that day. Going through that kind of trauma together and then pulling it off and coming out the other end. Yeah. And the Muse Machine's an interesting organization because it had people like me, one performer, then it had full dance teams, like you were saying.
Right.
And then other artists might be
ensemble from the Philharmonic, from the ballet, from the opera, from the Human Race Theater Company.
Right. So there would be a series of programs going into the schools. And what's interesting for me is one of the things you had to do as a performer was you had to do 3 or 4 days in the summer with all of the teachers that were part of that organization. And so that's really when I started doing teacher in-services and incorporating the arts into the curriculum so that they had something to talk about when they went back in the classrooms. And it was from that actually springboarded me into being a speaker when I was asked to speak to the board of the Muse Machine about the arts in schools. And that's the very first time I did the magic of leadership. I give everyone a 50-cent piece, and everyone learned that magic trick. So that really is the reason for me to be a speaker came from that organization and your work with me. And
the mime speaks.
That's it.
Exactly. I remember well, we were at Wright State University, and it was a square room that we had set up, and you were kind of in the middle of the square. You'd given everyone, like you say, a 50-cent piece. And I'll tell you, though, what I really take away from that whole experience is that I made a significant professional mistake. And so it would have been wrong, but easy for me to blame it on someone else. But I not only took ownership of it, but also managed to make something out of that. And out of it came, one, our relationship, our friendship, and then also we saved it for the school too. And they actually got to experience something that wasn't on the schedule that was meaningful to them too. So we whatever you want to say. We made lemonade out of lemons, and it was a powerful lesson for me. And you actually, in our conversation subsequent to that, have encouraged me to look at that in a different way than I might have been inclined to, because I think my memory would have just been my memory of the good would have been overshadowed by the potency of that failure on my own part to I forgot to make a phone call, and here we are, and it led to all of this, which is kind of remarkable.
It really is. And I think that so many people in leadership, now you're the CEO of the Cincinnati Opera, a large organization that does, world-class performances and brings in performers from literally all over the world to come and be on the stage. And I think it speaks volumes to what it takes to be that person and growing into that person from experiences like that. I absolutely agree. We call it failing successfully, dropping the ball, all of those things. And what I always say is it's not that whether or not you're going to do it, you're going to do it.
You will drop the
ball. What you do
Yeah.
after that,
Yeah.
that makes all the difference. So you and I are absolutely on the same page.
I'll just mention one other lesson I think that comes to mind for me, Curtis, is in your presentations, when you're talking about teaching people how to juggle, which is a metaphor for so many things in life, you ask the question of how many chances will you give yourself? How many times will you allow yourself to drop the ball before you decide that you can't juggle, right? Before you conclude that. What if you gave yourself, you then say, 10
5,000 tries.
What if you gave yourself 5,000 tries, right? And it's that idea of saying, you know what, you're going to fail. It's a matter of what you do after that, and how you either leverage that, how you turn that into something positive, but above all, never give up, right? That you're going to fail, but just keep at it. That's keep the goal in mind, and you'll get there.
It's funny because it brings me right into something else that we've done for years, and that is I'm a big goal setter. I know you're a big goal setter.
Right.
And that's one of the things I think we may have even talked about that day. That day, the goal was to get them back on track and to keep the music machine in the school, their whole school district, basically. And then we started meeting after that, introducing our wives to each other, who are fast friends and been around forever as well. But then every Christmas break, we would spend some time around New Year's, and I forget how many. Now, I think it's like 25 years in a row we've hung out New Year's Eve,
right.
And all our kids have grown up together, and all of those things. But one of the things that started that was getting together as a couples and doing goal setting.
Right.
And really going through, writing them down, and then the next year sitting down and going back through those and talking through, what did I do? What didn't I do? Why didn't I? And accountability partner. Mm-hmm. And I would love to just a little reflection on the value of, as somebody who is in the position you're in now, of having a really somebody who can talk to you 100% honestly and be an accountability partner.
Yeah.
Because I know I'm not the only one, and just like you're not the only one that I have.
Right.
But that's so critical, and I find so many people are afraid of that for some reason.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about the value of that to you?
Here's the thing for me, and you may be the same way, Curtis, is I'm a very independent person, and my goals are my goals, and I'm very possessive of them, good or bad. I'm very possessive of them. But, and so the kind of accountability for me that doesn't work is that the kind that exerts significant pressure or judgment. And what we have in our conversations is, oh, you want to change your goal? Fine, change your goal. It's your goal.
Right.
But let's just acknowledge that. No judgment. Let's just acknowledge that that's not something you're pursuing anymore. And that's perfectly fine. And that's what's worked and really sustained, I think, our conversations through the years, is that we can encourage each other, but and challenge each other just the right amount. And there's no kind of there's no judgment insofar as whether there's a change in direction or a change in plan. We're friends first, and that comes first. And then, and along with that means that we're supportive of each other, encouraging of each other. But then also there's this act of you you put it in writing. That's an important part of it. And you attach a timeline to it as well. And that's, what do we say? That a goal is a dream with a deadline, something like that. And that's been meaningful too. So there's a little bit of structure to it in that way, but then there's just enough accountability that makes you not feel like a jerk on either side of the equation, whether you're the one encouraging or the one being encouraged. And that's been really tremendous, I think, through the years that you and I have worked together, known each other, and encouraged each other too.
What's funny to me, and I absolutely agree with everything you just said, and what's interesting is, again, when you start on a path in any relationship, you don't really know where it's going to take you, and you don't know what things you're going to develop and learn from each other as that person continue, especially if you're a lifelong learner, which I know you are big time. And so the getting together with the couples and doing the goal setting, well, we started having these offspring and started getting busy, and, the room started filling up with other people. And so that kind of fell to the wayside. But we realized that was still really important that we spent time together, so much so that we would actually schedule going away and spending a couple days together. And from this evolved now what I do, which is the VIP days. And I just think it's a great story on how you and I finally said, you know what, we have to go and spend a couple days and paint the picture a little bit about, for you, your experience of how that started, and the value of that time away. Because I know for me, it was life-changing personally. Yeah. But I'd love for our audience to hear your perspective.
Yeah. So I think it's probably true for many people, and you're acknowledging this sort of phase in life that we've been in, which makes it more difficult to see each other on a regular basis. And so what was a breakthrough, I think, for our relationship was this idea of saying, how about this weekend? What if we just took that time, set aside that time, I don't remember, maybe it was a Friday and Saturday or something like that. And we said, okay, I'll take that day off. We'll drive to Columbus together. We'll spend the day together. We'll have lunch together. We'll have dinner together. We'll spend the evening together. And then, next day, then we'll do it all again. And that was possible with our schedules, A, and then B was tremendously rewarding to have that away time, that focus time, where we were not distracted, and we were able to, at that point, we were focused on some career decisions I was needing to make about what was next for me, and what should my professional future look like, and where did I need to make investments, and how should I be spending my days? And it was a broad, wide-ranging conversation. And you had, I'm not remembering exactly what, but you had a number of tools that you used that were really helpful. And you have a crazy amount of energy. Well, let me say it this way. I have an ability to stay focused on a particular problem for a long time, hours on end, to address it, look at it from different perspectives. You challenged me in that way because you have that even more so, and an ability to stay focused and say, okay, now we talked about this for the last 2 hours. Let's talk about this component of it now. What does that mean? Let's talk about how that relates to your family life, or let's talk about how that relates to what you've been saying in terms of additional education that you might be considering. And that was just extraordinary in having a thought partner. That's a term I really like. A thought partner to challenge my thinking, to say a little bit more deeply, okay, if you do that, well, then what? And then what? And then ultimately sometimes saying, does that matter? I remember in one particular case, you said, there's one person who thinks that, Chris, and that's you. And so it was a great way to challenge me to say, okay, I need to revisit that particular topic and challenge myself to say, well, maybe that's not how it is. Maybe maybe I'm looking at this wrong. Really tremendously helpful. It was an inspiring experience, and pivotal for me in terms of next steps for career, reminding me what's important, what's key, and keeping me focused and moving forward.
Wow. Well, first off, thank you so much. It's amazing experiences, and now we've done several of these since, as well as you are an incredible writer. And so when my book was finished, everybody thought it was finished. We did the same thing. We went now what we call a VIP day, and we went to Chicago, actually. One of us was there for some work, so we just added a couple days and literally locked ourselves in a room and read every single word of Life at Performance Level. And you made quite a few edits and quite a few changes, maybe even moved a chapter in the order. And so I'm just saying it went both ways, depending on what my life was doing, my decisions on being a speaker, all the different things. Should I write a book or not? Where do we invest our time and energy? And so those experiences were so deep and changing my life and now others. That's exactly why VIP days came to be. So now having the opportunity to do that with other people, I just wanted to say thank you, because of you being open and not judgmental and going on those kinds of crazy, let's just go for it and see what happens. Now it's affecting other people, and that would have never happened if you and I hadn't done that first.
My pleasure. Yeah, that was awesome. I think it was that I had been there for performances at Lyric Opera Chicago, and we were desperate to find some time to work on whatever project it was, in this case the book. And I think you said, what if we drove up together? And I think either maybe you rode up with me and then you flew back or something like that. Anyway, we were trying to be creative in finding a window of time to figure this out. It makes me think too that there's a certain challenge in working with creatives, and in my work at the opera, there's a lot of this. You need the right amount. You need to give creatives the right amount of space. So as I approached reading your work, it was always top of mind that I'm thinking about this in two ways. This is Curtis's work. This is his book. This is his message, and also I want to think of the reader as well. A little bit about myself being, in the place of the reader, but to give the creative plenty of space, plenty of license. And it's easy. They say that the greatest human urge is to edit another person's writing. And so, and with the right amount of, always high engagement, but the right amount of deftness in terms of how much you change text, then you can retain the voice and just enhance the clarity of the message was my objective with that more than anything. But gosh, it was great. Here I was talking with the author about his work, and it was inspiring, and it gave me a deeper appreciation. And maybe a couple times it came up that I said, well, what do you mean by this here? And you said, well, this is what I mean. And I said, well, let's just say that then, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So
clarity.
Yeah, exactly. Working towards clarity in that regard.
And throughout my career, and I would say because Elle runs the Zimmerman Group, and so we produced lots of different materials and slogans and different things, and very often those find themselves landing on your desk prior to it going to printing, and just over the years. And that's that give and take of just giving, knowing I'm not going to get anything in return. And I wanted to go on that for just a second. And that is, you're the kind of person that when you see something, if you can, you're going to improve it.
Right.
And the opera is all about, you're not doing 500 performances. You're doing only so many performances, and you want them to be as world-class as possible. And your audience is demanding that and expecting that. And one of the things you do that is amazing is you not only do that with your work, but you also do that as a person. And so I'm going to just call you out on this, and that is, I don't know how many years ago, 10 years ago, I can't tell you exactly how long, you may know better than me, but you noticed that, you know what, I might be carrying a few more pounds than I want around, and you changed something, and you started walking 2 miles a day and reading and doing that. and you never stopped.
Right.
That's the thing that I just can't tell people enough. You don't just see it and change it for a little while, but you become entrenched in that habit. Talk a little bit about how that helps you in the job you have now with energy, and why did you do that? And why haven't you gone away from it?
There was a question that I asked myself at some point, because I was like, well, I've been doing this like every morning, 2 miles for a long time. And it was a little bit against type, because I am often frustrated by routine just as a person, and like changes and unexpected things. But that's something that I've maintained. And in some ways I asked myself, well, how long should I do this? How much longer am I going to do this? And somehow the question hit me, which is, well, when will you be done walking? Like in your life, when will you not want to walk anymore?
Wow.
When will you be okay with, I'm just not walking anymore? And I kind of thought, okay, well, I guess I'm in this for the long haul. And so, over time that has changed a little bit, in that, I often watch, as 1/3 of a movie while I'm doing that. And different media changes, and there's access to different the great courses, which I'm a fan of. Mm-hmm. You can access those and video versions of those, which is great. And I recently got some plug-in Bluetooth earbuds that allow me to have the both some ear protection from the sound of the treadmill, but then also to not wake the whole house with the sound from the television going. So things have changed a little bit in that regard, but yeah, I maintained that, and it has because I want to keep walking, right?
Right.
I want to still be able to walk.
I love that perspective.
That's, for me, just enough routine to get the day started, and to and I've toyed a little bit with adding things to that routine, whether it is, do I do my daily journal at that point? Do I allow myself to look at email? And I go back and forth, and I'm still trying to resolve some of those things and deciding whether or not I want to sort of, stack onto that routine a little bit or not. But that's the one thing that has stayed in place for sure. And it's
I think there's a lot to be said that people say, oh, I'm going to get in shape, for instance, and all of a sudden they're going to go do P90X,
right? And
they're going to lift weights, and that's great.
Yeah.
And, been through all those programs, and my wife does all that stuff. I get it. But ultimately, that's not really, most people are not going to do that over 15 years. So the idea of making a small change, do it consistently, and then have it as a habit, and then you pile on top of that lifelong learning, so you're actually accomplishing two things at the same time.
That's
I
right.
just think as we move forward with the next portion of our conversation, it's important that is kind of laid out, of that's the kind of person you are.
Yeah.
When you see it and it makes sense, you can do it for a long period of time, even though you're a change agent and a marketing mind and amazing as far as leaning into the future.
Yeah.
There are some true norths that you live by, I would say. I think what we're going to do is invite you back, because there's so many other things we really need to talk about the professional side. I appreciate kind of painting the picture of our past, and I wanted to make sure our listeners got to hear that. And now we're going to blast off, and I think the best way to do that is just to invite you back on the show and have you do a second podcast with us, and it'll be totally focused on what we do to earn our rice every day.
Happy to do that, and would love to talk about opera.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm excited to have people get a different perspective of opera, and you can open up what opera really is.
Cool.
So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Curtis.
And keep living the dream. Well, as we come to a close, of course, we get to my favorite part of the podcast, and that is the 24-hour challenge. So, wow, Chris taught so many amazing lessons, and I would just have to say, when I think about morals, ethics, and value-based decision-making, it isn't about a decision-making, it's about the person that you are. And Chris brings that to the table every single day. So one of the things that he shared with us was about the Muse Machine situation and dropping the ball and letting an organization down. And I believe that the 24-hour challenge, we're going to capitalize on that concept and humility. And I want you to think about in the last 6 weeks, 6 months, or even a year, an individual or an organization or a team member where you work or family member that you've let down, that you said you were going to show up, you said you were going to come through, and you didn't. And even though in your mind you've made it right, I want you to go back to that person, that organization, that team member and say, you know what? I need for you to know that it still bothers me, and I'm very sorry that that happened. And I want to just triple check, is there anything else I can do to make this right? Is there anything else I can say to make you understand how bad I feel that I let you down? And I want you to do that because I want you to embody the concept of making it right. And you never know, you might end up with a friend for the next 25 years because you did that. Hey, go do it in the next 24 hours. Keep living the dream. And thank you so much for listening. Hey everybody, I wanted to thank you so much for listening, and I have a workbook that is all about script writing. It's how to write a new script. It's normally $15 on my website. I want to offer it to you today for free. Just go to curtiszimmerman.com/new script, and you'll be able to download that as a free gift. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you keep listening to the next 24 hours.